People are so consumed with content all the time. We were even talking about that before, where it's like, do we have all the notifications silenced? Because it's so easy to be distracted. Hello, welcome back to the Leadership Cafe podcast. I'm really excited to be here with you. I'm Sally, your host, and today I'm going to introduce you to Jen Rittenhouse. She is the Director of Brand and Marketing for Sitecrafting, which is a full-service web design agency in Tacoma. And remind me later, I think I have a lead for you all. Jen is a journalist turned copywriter turned brand marketer. And if you see her online, and we'll put her links, you can tell because she is an excellent storyteller. Her background spans mediums, industries, and decades, including consumer research, higher education, healthcare, consumer products, and nonprofits. And she began her marketing career before Facebook and Twitter existed. Me too. There was a day when we had to dial on the phone calls. Yeah. Her personal brand attributes are creative, fearless, and denim. And she believes in the power of big earrings. Yes, big ideas. Has never met a M Dash or a Pitbull song she doesn't love. I love that. And Jen and I worked together for a brief time at a healthcare system in Washington, and she's a little bit of sass and a lot of authenticity, and I love that about her. So I'm so glad you're here, Jen. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much.
It's so fun to have colleagues that we had from years ago. We haven't connected in years, but I'm grateful for you to be here. So since we're in the cafe, we like to chat about our mugs. Show us what you got.
I brought my little hippie cat mug.
Oh, how fun. Hippie cats. Love it.
Yes, thank you. It was a gift from my neighbor. We bonded over our cats.
Oh, fuck.
She had a white cat, I had a black cat, and they became best friends. And so when she moved away, she gave me a little gift bag that included the cat. So I'm a cat lady.
I love that. And I love that you knew your neighbor. That's not so common in today's world. It's weird how people will live next to each other and never know. So that's amazing. That says a lot about you as a human as well. So
Thank you.
yeah. Well, we are cheersing. I actually just emptied my mug. Mine is hand painted from a woman in Antigua, Guatemala. So Jen, I love when I see your posts online because you have just such a way with words and you're an amazing storyteller. I know you started as a journalist. I wonder if you'll walk us through first kind of what's been your career path and how'd you end up where you're at?
Yeah, it's been a winding road. I started as a sociology major for a hot second, and what I liked about sociology was the storytelling. So I loved reading articles, books from sociologists who would embed themselves in a community and write about it. I've always been a writer since I've been a little girl. And so it was my dad who gave me the nudge to study journalism. He said, hey, sociology is interesting, but you really want to be writing and telling stories. How about journalism? So I had an internship at a newspaper and just fell in love with the ability to bring forward a bigger idea or issue through the story of a person, a community, cats, trees, all kinds of things. But when I graduated, it wasn't a great time for newspapers. And so I fell into my first marketing role, and it was a split role between being an executive assistant and a marketing support person. And I eventually worked my way into a full-time marketing role. At that time, Facebook and Twitter became a thing, and I was the youngest person on the marketing team. So they said, hey, can you figure this out for us? And so that was also the good old days where social media was just kind of an add-on. Now it's a full-time gig. So I had a few different marketing roles. And then when we met, I managed a social media program for a health system for 6 years. So my job was all social media. But what that was really about was storytelling. So telling stories about patients and services. And I realized through it all that what I really was doing was coming from a place of brand. Everything I was doing was rooted in brand. And I had done some work prior to that as an agency, as a copywriter, and done branding work, developing taglines and message frameworks and naming organizations. And so I had had that experience and knew the value of that. And so that just sort of brand became the foundation of everything that I did. and then transitioned to the role that I'm at now at Sitecrafting. And so joined this organization to amplify our story for our services and impact in our community. Sitecrafting started as a website development company, and so that's what we're most known for. And over the years has added all of the support services that you need when you have a website. So we have a user experience team, we have marketers, we have designers. And so I came on as the organization was growing into doing more brand strategy work, in addition to overseeing our internal and external marketing communication efforts. So thinking about how we tell our story, because what we're most known for is web design. It's in our name, site crafting. And then websites. But, we do so much more. And so I came on as a dedicated resource to amplify that.
That's amazing. I love the fact that you embedded storytelling into brand. And I think, a lot of our audience is nonprofits, they're rural health, they're small business. And I think sometimes we just feel like content has to be out there and just do content for the sake of content without that through line of storytelling that amplifies your brand. And I also feel like with the introduction of so much AI solutions for marketing or messaging, or put in this link to your URL and we'll create 60 days of content for you in 3 minutes. That kind of stuff. What is your thought about the people who are under-resourced, stretched thin, are trying to find an easy way out? What would you say to them about caution, maybe? Or I'm showing my bias here, but
It's your cafe, do what you want.
yeah, right.
More is more. And so I have a hard and fast rule with my team and any program that I've ever worked for, that if you're not adding value and if it's not leading back to your brand ethos, then don't do it, right? People are so consumed with content all the time. We were even talking about that before, where it's like, do we have all the notifications silenced? Because it's so easy to be distracted. And when you think about who your target audience is, they too are getting lots of content. And I understand the challenge, right? Because there's also the internal pressures that come through and priorities. But when you have a really clear sense of who you are, why you exist, what value your organization provides to people, the impact, right? I think you can get really clear on when and what to do. Right. Whether it's, those social media activities, advertising.
Right. Oh, good. And we've heard this sentiment and this thread through a lot of our interviews on the podcast is to what end? Okay, back up. What are you saying and why? And really, I feel like that comes from an authenticity to keep your marketing about humans, not just about a checklist or a schedule or I got to post 3 times a week or the algorithm doesn't like me. And it's so easy, to your point, to get swept up in the mechanics of it and lose that connection, which is why I wanted to really have you on, is to talk to your point. You were doing social media, but it's so much more than that. It's the brand, it's the expression. I feel like that the higher logic of keeping it related to who you are as an organization is so, so important. I feel like one of the things that people do is they don't know how to look at their content and really identify or evaluate how it ties to what they do. How do you filter what you put into a communication?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we definitely have to feed the machine, right? We have a schedule and we have content plans and we have marketing goals. And so, it starts with what do we want to do and why, right? And also metrics. So there is storytelling that happens with the metrics too. And so looking at how did content perform, who's opening our content, who is engaging with it, what problems are they having, what problems can we solve for them, what story do we need to put in front of them about our services and our expertise that will be helpful to them in a moment. And yeah, I really challenge. I'm hoping that the day of vanity metrics are dead, as you mentioned. You're at the mercy of the algorithms. I was just on LinkedIn and saw a really great post from somebody, and they were talking about the holiday, and I'm like, that's weird that they're just now talking about unplugging for the holiday. And I'm like, oh, she posted that 3 weeks ago, but LinkedIn is just showing it to me now. I mean, it's really about your audience, right? I was just meeting and consulting with somebody who's launching a new business, and my challenge to her was, rather than thinking aspirationally about who you want to be, which is really easy to do, right? It's great to live in that. And I do think a brand is part authenticity, part aspiration.
Right.
But like getting really clear on who you're communicating with and what their problems are, and coming from, it's empathy. It's really rooted in empathy, and also like not pushing it. So there are times with our marketing program where if the content doesn't feel right, or if it feels like we're pushing something out just for the sake of pushing it, then we don't do it.
Right, right. That's so
Mhm.
good. And I think it's easy to fall into talking at people and not coming with that servant leadership, if you will, to help them or solve a problem or give them value or whatever. So I love that context. So when we were chatting before, we aligned on this idea of what we're doing in marketing and saying in brand and all that really needs to be able to show itself, if you will, in culture and in experience. And you had shared a story that you experienced with a brand that didn't quite align. And I'd love for you to tell that story because I feel like it's important for marketers to not work in a silo or in their own little echo chamber.
Yes, and it happens so often, right? I think that it takes a lot of courage to be really honest about the value that you provide in person.
Right.
And it's hard to do when you're in a marketing office and you're reaching for marketing goals and you're churning and burning on the content. And even if and part of that is believing in it. So I had an experience where I worked for an organization and I was actually part of rebranding project, and I was pretty invested with time in this organization, and so happy to drink the Kool-Aid and believe in what we were saying we were doing. And I had an experience in one of our birth centers when I had a baby, and it was terrible and traumatic. So I was a gestational carrier for a friend, so extremely privileged experience. I was an employee. They knew I was coming because I explained ahead of time to the director of the birth center because it's unusual. And anyways, and so I had this awful experience, and even in the moment, and I knew it didn't need to be that way because I'd had two previous births and it was not traumatic. And even in the moment, I felt really powerless. And there was even a moment where I called our advocacy people because we had something going on in the hospital. And so I was able to like get direct line to on a Saturday morning to people who know people. And then when I went back after leave, I told everyone like, this was terrible. If this happened to me as a person with a tremendous amount of privilege, like I advocated for myself. I had the phone numbers to call. I'm, teammates with the people who oversee the service line. What's happening to our patient? And I was, encouraged to like fill out a survey, which I'd already received and thrown in the trash because I'm like, what's a survey going to do? Right. And so for me, that was really when the bubble popped.
Yeah.
And I realized that it's all BS and it's work for the sake of work, and it's not work for the sake of impact.
Sure.
And I think it's really easy as marketers to think that we matter a lot to the people we serve or our organizations do. And it doesn't matter as much as we think it does, right? Like when we put our leaders and executives on social media and we think, oh, this is going to humanize our organization. They're going to see our CEO, they're going to see our COO or whatever. And that's not true. People actually don't care. They only care about your organization in the moment that they have a need for it. And if the experience in person doesn't match everything else that you're saying and doing, the story that you're telling, then it's all really empty. And yeah, it's just marketing for the sake of marketing, which
Yeah.
is another.
I think it's interesting because, I mean, we all can pick any brand, whether it was, oh, my cell phone carrier or whatever, or Hank, or this organization took a whole different turn than I expected it to. They say this and yet they're supporting this. I think
Mhm.
that, especially in today's world, so much noise, so much news, so much division. I think that it's a really interesting point because I can think of, health systems that I worked for where what they said externally and what they stood for externally was beautiful and right and what I really wanted to see. But from the inside, it was one of the worst cultures I've ever worked inside of. It's a whole different story. And so I feel like this story and the underthread really get at the need for clarity in the story and clarity in the culture inside. I really feel like marketing has a lot of influence on culture. as well, and on experience, because we can inform based on feedback, based on what are the comments, what are the surveys. So, have you had an experience at all where you feel like maybe in your work now, where the marketing things that you're seeing or hearing or experiencing can influence the culture or your customer experience at all?
Where I've seen it happen well is when leadership listens, right? And so I will always err on the side of the C suite is out of touch. Those executives who are in touch with reality are the exception to the rule. And so where I've seen that happen is with an organization that I'm on the board of, the Hilltop Artists. And I have seen, so as a board member, I'm able to have a different glimpse, but it's been really interesting to watch. It's a small organization. And so I think it benefits from being small. It also benefits from having a highly emotionally intelligent and empathetic leader who listens to staff when they talk to them. And so I've really watched that shape the culture firsthand, where the staff has shared so much so that they have returned money from donors, which is a really big deal for a small nonprofit to return money was something unheard of, but a very brave and courageous thing. And even today, they have an artist in residence every month, just a really special thing. And then they have a night where they have an open house, and you can go in the hot shop and see the artist in residence. And today, with the national walkout, the post that they shared was, we're still going forward and having this. He's been here all month, but we also want you to know that there's great national harm that's happening, and we stand with everybody who is taking a stand today. And we hope that you'll join us and be in community, because we still need community. So I have seen it happen in that way. I've also seen it be operationalized when organizations listen to people. So I had an experience when I was managing social media, and thankfully, I say that I got out all the getting was good, because when I left 6 years ago, social media was just starting to be where everybody was going to turn to air all their grievances, right? But I came to work on a Monday, and one of the hospital Twitter accounts had received a series of direct messages and from somebody who was in crisis and had been at the hospital. And it was really disturbing and concerning. And so I replied to the person and first I reached out to our patient advocacy folks. And then what it led to was a meeting between patient advocacy and then our crisis comms, or our crisis intervention people. And what it led to was creating protocols for how we would manage those and levels of responses. And so, it wasn't necessarily about protecting the system from harm. It was about figuring out, like, okay, if this is something that's happening and people are in crisis or they need access to something immediately, and this is where they're turning, what are the steps that we're going to take to make sure that they can get the services that they need?
That's so good, because I feel like in one organization I had a call center under me, about 100 staff. What was interesting in that organization is I was over the marketing and over call center, plus the member and provider services. And when we began to get these threads of feedback from all of those areas, it really began to inform a change in our marketing messaging as well, because we realized we were saying this and our consumers saying this. They're talking about something at this medicalized professional version, and people are coming saying, I need help right now. We weren't meeting in the middle on it. We ended up being able to influence the culture there. We changed the whole employee onboarding, the recognition system. We changed a lot across the organization based on that feedback. And at the end of the day, it ended up improving employee engagement and improving the customer, the patient, the provider engagement, because when you boil all the stuff away, these people needed help. These ones just wanted to be empowered to help them. And so I think it's powerful to not silo yourself as a marketer. I saw a stat last week on an article, I can't remember which one, but it said executive leaders know 4% of the problems, and your frontline people know 100% of the problems. And which kind of gets to what you were saying, is that you listen.
Yeah. I listen to people, and the ripple effect is really powerful. I remember a few years ago being at a conference where the director for brand for Alaska Airlines was talking about the process that they went through to add a fifth cracker to the cheese plate. And it's not something you would think about as a big deal, but with, they had to figure out load balances and like how much does a fifth cracker. But people were ordering the cheese plate and the feedback kept coming in like, gosh, I wish I had a fifth cracker. It was like, we have 5 pieces of cheese and 4 crackers. And so it can also be a really delightful thing. And then happy customers, happy partners, that all leads to happy employees. And so I always think a good measure of a brand is if it's also a place where people want to work. And if on the outside looking in, people get the impression that it's also a good place to work.
Yeah, that's really good. I can attest to the cheese plate on Alaska Airlines. I would pick that airline over others the whole time I was in the Seattle area because I love the cheese and fruit plate.
Yes, my spouse and I were we were just in the desert for a little getaway, and my mom is adorable. And so she pre-purchased cheese plates for us. And then on the way home, she did, and we weren't hungry. So we brought them home to our kids and they both took them in their lunch on Tuesday. I'm like, nothing says my mom hasn't been grocery shopping like an airline cheese plate for lunch.
That's awesome. Probably was her favorite lunch of the week. So, when you go to start a story or when you're writing a post for your personal page or whatever, what kind of things are you thinking through? Because they feel so intentional. They feel so well crafted. Like it could be a educational lesson for a university or something to read through your story because you always have a way of tying it back to a point or something authentic or fun or poignant or whatever. And is there a process that you go through when you write, or is it just you're that good?
You're so generous. Thank you so much. Well, I mean, my patron saint of branding is Tyra Banks, and she once said, different is better than better. And I really try to think about that. I try to think about if I'm going to take the time to write something, what it needs to be enjoyable to me for my own personal content, right? And then how can I get the most bang for my buck? So early on in motherhood, I had a picture of my daughter and then I looked at it. I'm like, oh my gosh, she looks just like her dad. Like, despite all my efforts, my 18-month-old was making this like little scrunchy face. And so I posted a side-by-side photo of them on Facebook, and the text read, spent the paternity test money on booze or shoes. By the looks of things, I'm in the clear. And I have a mentor who keeps pointing me back to that because he's like, that's so powerful. You said so much with so little. And so I try to think about that. Like, how can I be a little bit provocative? How can I make a point that people might want to linger or chew on and do it in a way that is worth their time? And every once in a while, I'll throw in like, if you're still reading this, because I understand that sometimes it can get a little bit lengthy, but I also try to be unbound by any fear of how it's going to be received, right? Because I feel like that can hold us back in so many ways. And even in telling my own stories about my own experiences in different organizations, there's this fear of like, well, what if somebody sees that? And what if that's received the wrong way? Or what? And I'm unbound by that, which I think helps.
Yeah.
And I also know who I'm talking to when I'm writing things. And so who I want to see it, I have that person in mind.
Okay, that's awesome. What does anything come to mind when I say, what are some of your favorite stories or messages or posts that you've done that you just look back to and go, I love that one. I'm a fan of all of it, but
Oh, thank you. Some of the stuff that I love is from my team. And one of the things I tell them, like, if it delights you, run with it. And so one of my teammates wrote a blog post that was marketing lessons from Love Island. And it is just absolutely delightful and had really high engagement. That was one where I was like, run with it. We're not going to, I don't know if our audience is reading Love Island, but if you're inspired by it, it'll be great, right? It's sort of like, if you think the joke's funny, then other people will. I think my favorites tend to be the ones that started as like a creative idea, right? Elizabeth Gilbert talks about like that creative spark, and if you don't grab it, it goes away. And so those are always my favorite because that's where I feel like the best power is. And so I wrote a post called Marketing by the Moon, and I've also turned it into a talk that I do with my speaker's agent. but it's not necessarily about like leaning into astrology. Like that's not really what it's about. It is kind of written for the astrology girlies in the room, but really what it's about is figuring out what matters to your team and creating a framework for communicating and like getting them engaged. And so for our team, one of my teammates follows the moon. And so for us, that's something that we've been able to use for relational building, for just, for decision making. I mean, we're not relying it for decision making as a team. It just gives us a shared language. So that one was pretty delightful. What I can't remember what prompted us to reconnect. There was something that you saw that I shared.
Oh, I don't remember it either. The way you frame a story is just so interesting. It's presented in such a authentic way and an interesting little nuance or twist, like you're never met a M dash or a Pitbull song you didn't love. I mean, that comes so naturally to you, and it's not a tone that a lot of people can do. I always have been attracted to a little bit of sass. I guess. Maybe because of being youngest of 8. You gotta have a little sass to survive in this world.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Before we wrap, are there any thoughts or final advice that you might have for small teams that are really trying to look at their messaging and make it more engaging?
Yeah. I mean, I think brands are living, breathing things and they evolve, right? And so I think it's always good to do work that connects you back with mission, vision, values. And you don't have to, I'm not saying like rewrite them, right? But I think every so often to do some exercises that get you rooted in what that is can often help give you a refresh to think about what your messaging is. I think having a strong foundation is a really great place to be. So whether you're calling them key messages, message pillars, there's lots of different ways to look at it, but getting really clear on what you are communicating. And so with our team, we have, if does it inspire, does it empower, does it delight, right? That's rooted in our mission. And so we have that sort of as our filter when we're thinking about the content we're creating. And so having that work, that strategy work done and having that foundation built really makes it easy because it gives you the criteria and the guardrails to make decisions. Yeah. And then also it can provide as a protective buffer from the requests that you get, right? You can just tie back and it doesn't meet the criteria. It doesn't, when we went through the filters, it doesn't match. But I think often what happens with small teams is you get stuck in a rhythm of just doing things. And so it's really hard to pull up and take a step back. But I do think doing that work, whether it's every 2 years, every 18 months, or when maybe engagement is low. We just did that within our team. We did a values workshop where we mapped our values to behaviors. And that was a really great way for us to create some shared meaning. But then also it just gave us, we even had journaling exercises. I got a little bit woo. Someone was like, I haven't written for journal for 5 minutes in a long time. And I'm like, I want you to get in your body and think about this. And I also wanted them to, I knew that the act of that would then give them something to continue to think about, but it gave us a way to re-engage and give our values a recharge, which then will hopefully impact the work.
That's so good. And I love that you called it a living, breathing thing. As our world around us is changing and the way consumers are making decisions or engaging with brands, I feel like what you just talked about is really vital, is to revisit. I mean, maybe you're not going to change it every time, but when, in our country, when everything is in chaos or feels very fragile right now in our country, it's probably not a bad idea to make sure that you've revisited so you're not putting tone deaf messages out there or things that accidentally give a message that you don't want it to or lands in a way that doesn't have compassion for what's going on for people. Political or not, it doesn't matter where you land politically. This is a hard time right now for humans, and there's a lot of big feels and a lot going on, but I love the idea of revisiting and having workshops around it because then that also keeps you connected. Do you still believe in this thing?
Yes, absolutely. And do your personal values still match with what we're doing here? Are those still helping to drive what we're doing? Yeah. And it doesn't have to be complicated. I was listening to a story on NPR yesterday, and it reminded me why I studied journalism. And it was a reporter in Los Angeles. It's a 4-minute it's a 4-minute listen, so that's not long, right? And he told the story of buying fruit from his favorite fruit vendor in LA as he was being deported. So he saw this man, how long he's seen him, and then he walked away and he heard noise and he turned and he saw the fruit vendor running. And then he caught on audio him being arrested and other people around. And it was such a simple story. It was so powerful and had such a big impact. So it doesn't always have to be complicated or long or fluffy to make an impact.
Well, Jen, I'm really grateful for your time today. I know we kind of went all over and I threw a few curveballs at you, but I love the conversation. I think it's just so valuable for marketers to get out of the groove of tactics and things and
Yes.
really take a step back and think strategically about what am I doing?
Mhm.
Who are the humans I'm serving and what am I bringing to make a difference for them? And this kind of thinking is really valuable for leaders, but also for all marketing folks. So thank you for being here and sharing your stories. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.